what you want to know!
What's going on, people? Myke C-Town here with another episode of What Do You Want to Know? Where you ask your questions. If I like your questions, I answer your questions on camera. Yes, it has been a long time since I've done one of these. Before I even get started, that intro that you guys just saw, that was done by the extremely talented Mr. Dominic fucking Count Blackula, Dom's Sketchcast. That dude. I'm just glad that I knew this guy before he fucking blew up. Way before he gets to the point where he's driving fucking Bentleys around with 13 fucking bony ass white girls in the back fucking combing his hair for him, you know what I'm saying? Putting fucking shea butter on his elbows for him, you know what I'm saying? That's the life, bro. That's the life. Anyways, thank you, Dom. That fucking intro is just fantastic. He also did a video where he actually goes through drawing me and my beautiful cat, Faith. So I will put a link to that in the description section down there. Make sure you guys go check that out, because trust me, this guy's going to be huge soon. But yes, as usual, we got 2 questions. We're going to jump right into this shit, man. Let's get it going, bruh. First question. Metal Mickey says, since Straight Outta Compton came out in theaters, what other hip-hop biopic / autobiographical movies would you like to see? Is it biopic or biopic? I think I've said both, and I don't know which one is right. Fuck, man, and nobody's ever corrected me on saying either one. But whatever. The first thing that comes to mind, a Def Jux movie, man. We've had the Revenge of the Robots thing that came out a while back, but that's just not enough. We need something really in-depth. I think something covering the whole story of Jux would be rad. Like, I used to think we needed a Weatherman movie, but I actually think the story of Jux would be a little bit more interesting, and clearly would incorporate a lot of the Weatherman stuff anyway, since they're very closely tied together. But I think if it started with like Company Flow, and then moved into the breakup of Company Flow, and then to LP starting up Jux, then the evolution of Jux with, you know, Liff and Canox and Aesop Rock, and then Murs and C-Rays and who else? Rob Sonic, and then Cage, who could really have a whole movie by himself. But then ending with the later era of Jux, which was, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, Dizzy Rascal. Then the ending of Jux with putting out the posthumous release from Kamuteo, King of Hearts, which is amazing, by the way. I think that story would just be absolutely incredible, and I really hope something like this happens before everything is over and done. Same with Rhymesayers. You know, being one of the biggest independent hip-hop labels ever, I think is a story in itself, and I think it needs to be told in depth. There was like that mini documentary that was on YouTube that was pretty cool, so I guess it's kind of already been done, but maybe something more with Slug and Ant and what they were setting out to do with hip-hop. I think that would be really fresh. I think there should be a Scribble Jam documentary or movie. I think that would be really cool, because they could show how the whole thing started. You know, some of the most notable people to battle in Scribble Jam. I think that would be a cool thing to cover. People like Juice, Rhymefest, Sage Francis, Idea, again, Eminem. I think that would make a really cool movie. Public Enemy. I think that's a no-brainer, man. I would almost rather have seen a Public Enemy movie than I would an NWA story, the more I think about it, you know, because I think a lot of people just kind of see Public Enemy as the weird revolutionaries, and it kind of stops with Fight the Power. But I think a detailed account of what happened with them throughout their career would be really cool. Wu-Tang, a start to present day Wu-Tang story would be absolutely fantastic, but with so many members in that crew, with so many interesting personal stories on their own, I feel like the shit would have to be 4 hours long. But if there was a director that was actually able to narrow the story down, that would absolutely rule. Sometimes I think a Big L movie would be cool, sometimes I don't. I don't know. I think an MF Doom movie would be really interesting, you know, showing how he started with KMD, then to his brother passing, and then him moving on with being this masked character and ending up being one of the best MCs to ever touch a microphone. I think that'd be really dope. And shit, before I go, Hieroglyphics, man, the most underrated hip-hop crew, in my opinion. A story about how that whole crew started, I think would be fucking dope. About how Dell and Peplove and Casual and Souls of Mischief, etc., about how that whole thing came to be. I think that would be really, really interesting. Those are the only ones I can think of. If you guys can think of any more, throw them in the comment section down there. Next question. Nate Moore asks, in your opinion, Myke, what are some of the most underrated metal bands? I think it's hard to talk about bands being underrated when a large majority of the bands that you listen to are underground bands. Because to me, underrated and underheard are two completely different things. Underrated, I feel like that's a band that came into the game and did something special within the genre. Maybe moved the genre in a certain direction, or maybe solidified the genre in a certain way, changed the genre in a certain way, whatever. Underheard, to me, is just a band that did the music really well that a lot of people just didn't notice, or didn't talk about, or didn't really listen to that much. So, underrated, I don't know, man. I can think of a lot of underground metal bands that I don't think people talk about enough that actually did do something special within the genre. Starting with the band Bewitched. You know, they're a Swedish black metal band, but they were doing that whole black thrash thing. They were doing pretty much what Skeleton Witch and Midnight were doing way before either one of those bands were. But I don't really hear a lot of people talking about them, and I think they're fantastic. And the next one I don't think would be any shock, and that's Black Funeral. I don't think they're given enough credit for what they did for American black metal. You know, I'm a little hesitant to call them underrated, but maybe they are. I don't know. I guess just not enough people talk about them the way they talk about bands like Krieg or Leviathan or Judas Iscariot. And I think that their early stuff, the early Black Funeral stuff, especially Throne of the Beast, I think it's just absolutely incredible. Especially when it comes to super raw black metal. It's top notch. Sometimes I think the band Dawn is underrated. You know, they were a fantastic black metal band that did a lot for the whole crossover between black metal and death metal, kind of like what Dissection did. But, you know, maybe people already know that and say it and I just don't hear it. I don't know. You know, the same thing goes for the band Violence. You know, sometimes I think they're underrated simply for their insane riffage. But maybe they aren't either. I don't know. You know, I'll tell you a band that I definitely think is super underrated, and that's the band Eucharist. Eucharist was a Swedish melodic death metal band, and they did an album called Mirror Worlds that came out in 1993. Now, for those who know their Gothenburg history, this is before Lunar Strain, and it's the same year as Skydancer, even though I think Mirror Worlds is a better record than Skydancer. And this is the same year as with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness. Now, the thing is, what they were doing with the riffs, the melodies, the bouncy riffs, you can clearly hear their influence on the later works of the three big Swedish melodic death metal bands. That's At the Gates, Dark Tranquillity, and In Flames. Listen to Mirror Worlds, and then listen to Dark Tranquillity's The Mind's Eye, listen to In Flames' Horacle, and then listen to At the Gates' Slaughter of the Soul. I think it's clear that these guys all heard and loved Eucharist. And I don't want to say they ripped off their sound, but they definitely took bits and pieces of their sound and incorporated them. Of course, also with pieces of Edge of Sanity, but I definitely wouldn't call Edge of Sanity underrated. But yes, Eucharist, definitely underrated, because when people talk about Swedish melodic death metal, Eucharist's name does not come up, and that's an absolute fucking crime. And the last band that I can think of for now is, there's a band called Beastia Arcana. I've actually shown their record before. They're a US black metal band that only put out one album, but it's members of Achilles and Nightbringer. And what they are doing is that kind of hazy, chaotic, muddy black metal that bands like Misfirming and Sinmara and Scaff and Shrine, all those bands are doing, and they got really popular doing it. But for some reason, people do not rave about Beastia Arcana the way they rave about all those other bands. And I really feel like if you've not heard Beastia Arcana, but you've heard all those other Icelandic dark metal bands, and I feel like you need to hear the Beastia Arcana album, because it's on par. It's on par. That's all I'm saying. It's on par. Man, I know I'm probably leaving a shit ton of bands out, but those are the only ones I can think of. So let's start a fucking discussion, man. Any bands that you can think of, throw them in the comment section down there. Yeah, let's talk about it, man. Let's talk about it down there. All right? But that's it for this video. And as usual, thank you for living, thank you for loving, thank you for being you. And I'll see you guys next time. All right?